If you thought the botched Chagos Islands surrender was over, well, think again. The latest revelations about the Prime Minister and his alleged mate's personal dealings with Mauritius make Love Island drama look tame. Now, let's start with what we know. The Prime Minister, in his infinite wisdom, is allegedly considering handing Mauritius up to £18 billion. Both UK and Mauritian officials have denied this, but have not provided alternative figures as of yet. If that's true, though, that's enough to fund 20 hospitals, 300 primary schools, or a fleet of warships. All things this government is coincidentally delaying or scrapping. Oh, and let's not forget, this money could also pay for that 85% of that elusive black hole in our budget. So why is this happening? Well, if I had to bet, I'd say it's down to the student union politics, teenage-level peer pressure that's now playing itself out on an international scale. Now, one of Starmer's long-time lefty lawyer mates, Philippe Sands KC, has been pushing for this deal for years. He represented Mauritius against the UK, of course, and seems to despise Britain's history. Mr. Sands compared our legal ownership of Chagos to Russia's invasion of Crimea. Yeah, crazy stuff. Yes, that's Starmer's mate equating Britain's presence in our own territory to Putin's illegal military invasion in Ukraine. It's just utter madness. But it gets worse. Mr. Sands, in a blatant act of defiance, entered British territory, hoisted the Mauritian flag, and acted like some sort of colonial conqueror. It's ironic, isn't it? Oh, funnily enough, he tweeted this then deleted evidence, but it was too late because that video was made by Mauritius' close ally, China, who had their state-owned media make a whole propaganda video on it. I wonder why. Anyway, Mauritian bias doesn't seem to stop there. Today we learned Starmer was wined and dined in Mauritius back in 2013. Well, he was flown out to a 5-star luxury beach resort to speak at a Mauritian Bar Association conference on the Chagos issue. Well, he walked away with a model warship as a gift. And there's, of course, there it is there. There's, of course, that little missing detail about whether the Prime Minister was paid for that trip. Well, I'm sure that will come out eventually. And today, the government finally gave a national security excuse for why we must hand over Chagos. Well, what's their claim? Well, they claim Diego Garcia's electromagnetic spectrum, which enables secure military communications, can't function without a deal because there's a risk it breaches international law, a risk which the UK government will want to avoid. Well, Tom Tugendhat, the former security minister, dismissed that argument pretty fast. He said, as security minister, I saw the advice on the Chagos Islands deal. This explanation is nonsense. Now, he's supported by former government official who also shut down the government's argument. They said the Foreign Office is worried that it would make us look bad if we lost the case to try and keep the territory. They said to the Global South we would look like colonisers again, and that the government are scrambling for a justification for giving away up to $9 billion, and that this telecoms issue could be solved for a fraction of that cost. There you go. This isn't diplomacy, is it? It's a lefty lawyer coup. The Prime Minister seems to be compromised, tangled up in a bias due to his personal relationships and perceived loyalties to Mauritian legal networks. And what's the apparent goal here? I think it's to sell him as some anti-colonialist hero, a man who sacrifices British sovereignty while UK taxpayers get fleeced for billions under the thin guise of reparations. But that being said, let's get the thought of my panel. We've got political consultant Suzanne Evans. We've got Stephen Wolfe, the director for Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and Labour Party activist Susie Stride. Hello, guys. How are you doing? OK. Surely, Susie, let's start with you for a bit of balance here. Surely, if Keir Starmer took a 5-star, all-inclusive, all-paid-for trip, which we don't know, it's just alleged, but he took this trip, how can he have an unbiased perspective on this deal? He's got close connections with them, has he not?
I mean, to be honest, I've only just seen that article, but I mean, people can paint it that way if they want to paint it that way. I don't actually think that is why Keir Starmer is going the way he's going. I think ultimately, you know, James Cleverly, who was obviously the former Foreign Secretary, was also trying to get a deal, and they had 11 rounds of talks to get a deal. So I think this whole toing and fro, ultimately, is the deal a good deal? Look, I'm not an expert in this. It doesn't look great at the moment, I'm going to say. But what I don't think is right is this whole thing of, there's some sort of bias going on. Because otherwise, we would be saying, well, why was James Cleverly trying to get a deal? Why did we have 11 rounds of talks? Why did James Cleverly himself also say it is absolutely right that we adhere to what the International Court has said? That's the words of James Cleverly. So I don't think there's a split here between...
I think the Tories really botched this from the start, just wiring this crisis today. But, Suzanne, I mean, you know, can he get away from this bias? Then we've got Felipe Sands, his close mate, who's obviously been anti-Britain from the start. He represented Mauritius against us plenty of times. They're best mates. Is he just being this peer pressure for him to do this?
It's like Keir Starmer's looked around and thought, who can I find who's the most treacherous lawyer in the country? Because those are the ones that I want at my negotiating table. I mean, it's hard to get away from anything but that, isn't it, really? And Susie, with the best will in the world, James Cleverly got it wrong too. Two wrongs don't make a right. The fact is this was hidden from the public. The Chagosians don't want this. They don't want to go to belong to Mauritius in the belly of China. And we saw in that video clip there, you know, the Chinese, of course, they're loving this idea that the Chagos Islands will become Mauritius because Mauritius is one of their major partners. This whole idea that it belongs to Mauritius is a fabrication dreamt up by the International Court of Justice, which is, frankly, a Russia-China legal entity that we should do what Trump has done, frankly, and say we're not going to take any notice from it. It's completely biased and we're not going to take any notice.
Stephen, do you take that point as well? I mean, China put out that video, they clipped up Felipe Sands' tweet when he hoisted the Mauritian flag on Chagos. You know, surely this is just playing into China's hands, what Starmer's planning to do.
I think the actions of our representatives of Britain in Chagos has given a coup in diplomatic terms to the Chinese, and there's no doubt by showing that particular image when he was trying to delete it from his own X or Facebook or whatever account he's got, then that just shows how important it is for them. Because when we look at the summation of the deal is that we're actually paying someone to take land off us. It's going to cost us billions. It gives an improved opportunity for the Chinese. But I'm more concerned about the one important group of people that this was all supposed to be about. It was supposed to be about giving the Chagosians, who were forced there as slaves to live there, an opportunity to have self-determination. That's my concern with Keir Starmer, because he wants to take us back into the European Union, is another example with the Chagosians that he just does not like people having self-determination. And I'm more concerned about them, and I think their issue, by saying we don't want it, speaks more volumes than anything else.
If he really wanted to do this properly, he'd have a referendum. The Chagosian people. But of course they're not. He's absolutely not going to do that.
We've obviously, the Chagosians have been in uproar about this. And they've said they want representation, they want to be listened to, but we're seeing that that's still not, you know, transpiring, Susie. Is this just, I mean, we saw with Grenfell Tower, that's going to be knocked down, of course, and there hasn't been consultation with those people. It's just a characteristic of the Labour government.
No, I think that's a different thing. I think when you look at Grenfell Tower, there are lots of different groups that are involved in that, and actually there are groups, community groups that are involved in that, you know, some people want to see the tower come down because for them it's a reminder of the horror of what happened. You know, there are other groups that want it to stay because for them, you know, actually it's a reminder of their loved ones. But actually people are quite divided on that. So actually I think it's really important on that to say this isn't, you know, Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer saying, well, we don't care what you think. They've gone in and actually they've listened to people and actually they're going to be very respectful in how they take it down. It's not going to be bulldozed down. It's going to be very carefully taken down. And actually there's going to be a memorial put in there to the people that lost their lives. But actually, I don't think they're not listening to it. And it's really important because I actually thought the coverage of that was actually really not good because the fact is there's a whole lot of residents and family members that do want it to be taken down.
Well, I just want to get back to Chagos for a second. Hopefully we'll get to talk about that a little bit later on, Susie. But you know, obviously they haven't had their say and they desperately do want it. And a lot of Chagosians want to remain British.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest. When you look at the history of this, it is all bit mad. What was it, 50 years ago, the British turn up with guns and say, you guys have all... I mean, it is, you know, there's nothing good about that, you know, let's be honest.
Bought it off the French.
Well, no.
It was a French.
I think, no.
The French did actually steal it from the Mauritians in the first place. And some really interesting stories about losing people on caves just offside the island, if you look into the history about it. But we have to take that back and say, yes, it's been ours for a long time. And it's been an important strategic area for us. I'm not sure how this lease scenario is going to work. Here we are, we're paying to have the Americans to stay on what was our land for a leasehold period of time. A leasehold, as we know, is not the same as freehold. And that's where we have the problem.
I mean,
just to wrap up, because we're going to move on in a second. The thing that's really upsetting British people, and I don't blame them, is the cost. We're talking about this. I know the government have said that this is not accurate. These figures aren't accurate, but we heard the numbers. 18 billion floated around quite a lot.
Nigel Farage is saying today, if they link it to inflation, it could be as much as 50 billion over the 1999-year term. I got one or the other, but you know this invisible black hole. £22 billion, Rachel Reeves said, is a black hole. That's why she's got to put up taxes and cut spending. It's tosh. It's the biggest whiff of male cow I have ever heard. Because Labour... 18 billion at least on this, 22 billion on Ed Miliband's carbon capture scheme, which MPs have said is completely, you know, potentially unworkable.
The black hole's turned into a crater.
Labour have said that figure is inaccurate, and also actually the President of Mauritius has backtracked on that.
I've got to move on, unfortunately, guys. Sorry, we're out of time. We'll get stuck in with my panel later on, I promise.